I think the biggest one is people are like, oh, I don't need to do it now. I can wait.
Yeah.
I can tell you guys, listen, I've been here for a long time. I can see somebody sitting in that chair and I'm like, this person's not going to come back every year for the next 4 years and ultimately do it when they're 36, right? Because in their mind, they're not ready. So I think we have to change that. It's not like something we do as a last ditch effort. I think we need to do it proactively.
Amy and I are both in Los Angeles. I don't know how familiar are you with the area?
I love the Dodgers, so I watch a lot of Dodgers, but I know nothing about California, LA other than that. Did you guys watch that 18 inning game or no? No.
Husband did, yes.
I did. I didn't make it through all 18 innings, and I definitely got shamed for that from my family, who are
Yeah.
also big Dodger fans. But I
But
just
I
had
have to
to
give it
go
to
to
the
bed.
Blue Jays to come back and win yesterday post
I
that.
know.
I was like, that's impressive. Way to dust yourself up, guys, and get right back up.
Yeah, they certainly had like a chip on their shoulder, bone
Yep.
to pick.
They were ready.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Tonight will be
Is
interesting.
I know.
is
They got to
is
win
is tonight at Dodger Stadium again, or is it? Yeah.
hmm
Okay.
because then
And
they'll
then,
Well,
go back. Yeah.
so
so
it's kind of now or never. They need to turn the tide.
I agree. I agree, Amy. Well, we both know what we'll be doing tonight.
Yep.
well, yes, Amy and I are both in Los Angeles, but we are on separate sides of the city. So I'm near the coast and she's near the valley. So really, we're basically states away from one another when it comes to traffic. But where you're in New York City,
Yeah,
correct?
it's like being uptown and downtown. My friend's like, "Oh, are you
Yes.
coming with me?" I'm like, "Ugh, it's all the way downtown. I can't. I can't. It's too much traffic."
I
So
know.
similar story.
Yes, amazing. Well, we are so excited to have Dr. Jaime Knopman, a leading reproductive endocrinologist and the Director of Fertility Preservation at CCRM New York. She is a top doctor recognized for her work in egg freezing and fertility care for cancer patients, and she also serves as the medical director of Chick Mission, a nonprofit supporting young cancer patients facing fertility challenges. And she's also on the medical advisory boards for CoFertility and The Breasties. Did I get all of that right? And is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I always say my biggest I'm like the thing I'm the most proud of is that I am like a mom of two daughters, but that doesn't go in your bio, I guess. So I don't know.
It should.
It
It should
should.
It
go in your
should, right?
bio.
I know that
I
takes
think
a
so.
lot more work than most of those other things, I will say. But yeah.
Yes, I had my first daughter this past summer, and I am learning all of the things about how hard it is.
Every day I'll text one of my friends and be like, "Did nobody tells you how hard parenting is? This is the hardest job ever."
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so
And
true.
how
Well,
old are your daughters?
I have a ninth grader and a sixth grader. So really at prime ages where everything is just so wonderful every day. Yeah.
No
the
big
fun
life
part about having
changes.
Yeah.
girls.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
I didn't
Amazing.
know that you were involved with Chick Mission until I saw your bio come into the like our little planning doc. I just sent that around to a girlfriend of mine who has gone through a breast cancer diagnosis. Wow, that is such an incredible organization.
Yeah. It's really great. I'm so lucky I was there since the beginning. And I'm not violating HIPAA. Amanda was my patient and froze eggs and then was putting this together and was like, "Do you want to be our chief medical officer?" So I was like, "Sure." And it's grown into it's amazing what it's become. And I'm always like, she is like the little engine that could. That woman does not take no from anyone.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's such important work. Yeah, I'm excited to talk more about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are here today to talk about egg freezing, egg preservation, also your new book, which comes out January
13th.
13th. How are you feeling about approaching publication date?
I think a lot of different emotions like fear, anxiety, happiness. It's like I'm about to get my period every day. I'm like, it's like up and down and up and down. I'm like, oh no, right? But like it was a labor of love that if I think back about it, like would I ever do it again? I'm like, I'm not sure. That was really hard work.
Yeah.
But I'm very proud of the final product. So I think that I am excited for the world to see it.
Well, Amy and I have received an early copy and it's wonderful. So we're
Thank
very
you.
excited for you and we're
Thank you.
excited to share it with listeners. So dive in. Let's just start with your background and how you got into this work and why you're passionate about it and why you're passionate specifically about the topic of egg freezing.
Sure. So I always say I knew I wanted to be a doctor since I was in the second grade. I read this book about Elizabeth Blackwell, and I was like, I want to be a doctor. And or I thought at that point, I thought life was very linear. And so I was like, I will go to med school and then I will go to residency and I will go to fellowship. And when I got to medical school, I thought, okay, I want to work in breast cancer. I want to work with women. I soon came to realize that I did not want to do general surgery. I wanted to do OBGYN because I really wanted to do women's health. And then once I was in OBGYN, I found hormones and all of that so fascinating. So went and applied for fellowship in reproductive medicine. I like to say, like, my fertility career was born when egg freezing really was born because I was a fellow at NYU where they were doing a lot of their early studies when I was a fellow. So I was very involved in those studies. And then my first job that I took out of fellowship, I was the only female physician in this practice of many men. Never
No.
forget it. The main man said to me, he's like, "You're 35 and you have ovaries. You can be the director of egg freezing." I was like, "Okay, cool." And it stayed, right? I'd be like, "No, a 35 really, we're not doing that." Right. But like, so it really became something that I was able to watch grow. And I feel very fortunate to have had that.
Yeah, because I don't know if I even knew this, and I'm assuming many listeners don't know this, but egg freezing came after IVF. Like it was not
Oh,
part of the process,
yeah. So the
correct?
first baby, I always say we have the same birthday almost. So the first baby was born from IVF in 1978. So everyone knows in 47. Lois Brown in April of 78. And the first baby was born from egg freezing actually in 1984. But egg freezing really didn't go mainstream or like live time until like 2011, 2012, when the American Society of Reproductive Medicine removed the experimental label. And the
Mm.
reason this gap, there were so many years, is it's very hard to freeze and thaw an egg because the egg is a lot of water, right? So when you freeze something with a lot of water, you get ice crystals. And the stage at which we freeze eggs is so sensitive to damage that we couldn't figure out, like, how do we freeze and thaw it so that we don't damage the egg's important structures. So it took a really long time before egg freezing was around. And then even in the beginning, most of the people who were egg freezing were doing it experimentally. People weren't doing it like, oh, I'm 28 and I think I want to have kids, but not for a while. I'm going to go freeze eggs.
So it started mostly for research purposes, not necessarily fertility preservation, and that came later.
Correct. So it wasn't like a thing that we did. And I even say, I used to tell people I was an infertility doctor. That was how I introduced myself. Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm an infertility doctor. And now I say I'm a fertility doctor. And that
Mm.
shift really happened, I got to tell you, like right around COVID. I mean, when I think back, COVID changed a lot of what was going on in the fertility world because we thought it was going to go dark, right? Everyone was going to sit home. Nobody's going to do fertility treatment. But that's actually where egg freezing exploded. And I think it was mostly because people didn't have to go to work, right? They could work remotely and they had more flexibility. I also think, like, socially and maybe emotionally, people started to think, okay, what do I really want out of life? Like, here I am being forced to sit alone at home. I think I really want to be a mom, or I think I want to have the possibility to be a mom or whatever. So that's where egg freezing really got pushed to the forefront.
Do you think also that people, because socially people weren't interacting as much either, and like maybe
Mm.
dating, we were all feeling like
Yeah,
our lives are on pause, but
a
your
hundred
age
percent.
is not on pause, right?
I was like, "Oh, wow, this is crazy." Like, so, and I thought I was just had this like smart idea. And then I started to read studies and I was like, "Oh, wait, it wasn't just me." And even in the UK, they came out, they were like, "Our egg freezing numbers have gone up 50% since the pandemic."
A lot of people, I think, associate egg freezing with, oh, you're getting older and so you want to freeze your eggs, or, you're going through cancer treatments or something where you need to freeze your eggs. But one of the things that you're pushing for, and this is kind of what is interesting about your book, and also I want to make sure I get the quote correctly because you say something about sunscreen
Oh, yeah.
and,
Yeah, so
and about, yeah.
yeah, I wanted that to be the title. One day I like call my co-author has now become like my best friend. Like
Yeah.
I speak to her 9,000 times a day. I was like, I know the title. She's like, what is it? I'm like, wear sunscreen and freeze your eggs. And she's like, that's great.
I
And
love
then when
it.
we sold it, the publisher's like, that's not the title. I'm like, wait, what?
Ah,
What? I know. So now it's a chapter title, but
yeah.
because I said like we wear sunscreen, right?
Hmm.
Because it's preventative. We do it, you still may get a sunburn, unfortunately still may get skin cancer, but you put it on to prevent what may happen. That's really what egg freezing should be, right? You do it to prevent or reduce the chance of developing infertility. It doesn't mean you won't develop infertility. It does, you won't get that burn, but it does reduce the chance. And that's why we do it, right? So I
Hmm.
think it used to be the women who froze when we first started doing this were in their 40s. It was like a Hail Mary, right? Like, can we just throw the ball down the field and hope somebody catches it? But now that's not the case. Now we're saying do it in your 20s. It shouldn't be a Hail Mary. It should be preventative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this idea of it being proactive instead of reactive is really, I think, catching on with a lot of people. And not just because women are wanting to work longer and not have kids later on, but I think with like what you're saying, like a lot of the younger generation too, like in your early 20s, like really starting to think about fertility preservation and what that looks like. I'm curious to know how does that feel as a mom? And like, what are the conversations kind of you're having with your daughters or thinking about having with your daughters
If
when
you
they're a
come to
little bit
my
older?
house, you're like, oh my God, if we hear the word vagina and boob one more time, we're going to be like, oh.
So funny.
I mean, if your mom's a gynecologist, like you have to imagine that you're
Yeah.
going to talk a lot about that. But I want my girls to like. I think you need to know your body and know your choices, right? Whatever you decide, you have kids, you don't have kids, you marry a man, you marry a woman, like you want to carry, you don't want to carry. I really don't care, but I want you to control that conversation, that dialogue, not it to be controlled
Mm.
for you. So that is what I think knowledge gives you and access to care gives you, because then you can decide what you want to do.
That's so
That
good.
resonates so
Yeah.
much. Kate, this is
I'm
like
like,
literally the hill Katie and I will die on. It's just
Yeah.
why aren't we more informed? Why aren't we
yeah,
taught about these things? Why is it not until you're met with a problem getting pregnant, loss, navigating loss, not being able to get pregnant over and over again, that then you find out what could have been done. We interviewed somebody who found out just recently she has the Fragile X chromosome. She's turning 38 this year, but she had been getting checked
for Brock. Yeah.
for BRCA um, forever since she was in her early 20s. How nobody talked to her about fertility preservation, and like now she's in this cycle, and so just goes back to like this is the hill that I will die on. Is the information is power, and
I'll even
how
do
can
you
we
one
provoke?
worse. I've seen two sets of sisters. I don't mean to cut you off, Amy, who
Yeah, no.
the older sister was Fragile X, but never shared it with the younger sister because she just didn't. And then the younger sister is now 37 and ultimately like pretty much in menopause. And you think to yourself, oh my goodness, like, why don't we talk about that? Even I will say, when did your mom have menopause? And most girls or women will say, I don't know. To talk to her about that. Now I joke around. I'll be like, I remember my mom being like, "Open the window, close the window, open the window," like she was having. But we should talk about it. Like, why are we embarrassed? Like, we shouldn't be embarrassed to say, "Oh, I got my period or I went through menopause." Like, we should talk about that because it'll help other people. So
What needs to change to get this to be a normal conversation alongside other things like, I don't know, career development, financial planning? Like, I guess those are also things that women historically have not been empowered about either. So we're sort of trailblazing across the board here. But yeah, maybe
it
that's a
does start
question.
with us as doctors a little bit, right? Because we go to our OBGYNs, most of us, in our early 20s, even late teens, and we talk about mammograms and pap smears and STD testing, but we should also make a part of that conversation fertility planning. And it should not be seen as a failure, right? You did not fail because you're 35 and you don't have a partner. You just were exploring other options. So we need to change it from I failed and I didn't meet somebody to have children to, oh, I think I want to have children. I don't know, but I want to do it on my timeline. when it's right for me, not when, it's right society or my ovaries say I have to do it.
Yeah. When somebody comes to you, like, what do you think some of the biggest misconceptions they have about freezing their eggs and what that looks like?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is people are like, "Oh, I don't need to do it now. I can wait." I can tell you guys, listen, I've been here for a long time. I can see somebody sitting in that chair, and I'm like, "This person's not going to come back every year for the next 4 years, and ultimately do it when they're 36, right? Because in their mind, they're not ready. So I think
Mhm.
we have to change that. It's not like something we do as a last ditch effort. I think we need to do it proactively. I also think that there's a big misconception that it takes several months, it's going to be super painful, you have to change everything you eat and this and that, and that's really not the case, right? So we have to give people better information so that they can make better decisions about it.
Well, especially when you're in your 20s,
Yeah.
you probably have a much, your egg quality is generally much better. So this is, it could be like much faster, like for us
It
girls
is.
over
Actually,
here who
you're
are doing
100% right. Yes. You
many
go
rounds.
faster. I say to women, you'll take less days of meds, right? Young, healthy egg
Interesting.
freezers, they need 8, 9, 10 max days of stim meds. The dose is much lower, right? Because their ovaries have so much to give. And they don't need the warm up. I joke around, I'm now a retired, I say retired athlete, but when I was young, I just got out there and I ran. It didn't I didn't need to do the stretching or the glute activation or my hamstring, whatever. I just ran and then I was done. I would go back home, never stretch, done. Now, as an older individual, I need to do that. I need to do a 1 mile warm up. I need to do, you don't need that when you're younger. Your ovaries are just boom, they're done, you move on. And so
Mhm.
it's actually a much more enjoyable process when you're younger than when you're older.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's such a good way to look at it because I think who were who was I talking to recently, Amy? Or was it somebody on the podcast? But we were talking about how like IVF can feel so overwhelming, and it
Mhm.
often is. But we also have friends who have gone through IVF where it is more of a like they have the benefits. They want to just this is the way that they'd like to try to create a family, and it's
Mhm.
like a two. Oh, I know what it was. I was at the nails. I was getting my nails done, and my
Perfect.
nail tech just had a baby at the same time I did this past summer, also IVF. But for her, it was they had the benefits. And so they were like, let's just do it this way because then we don't have to worry about if there are any problems. And she was like, yeah, I went in and did my retrieval. And then we did our transfer a few weeks later. And then it was like, oh, I'm pregnant. And it was like,
Yeah.
like 4 weeks,
Sometimes
5 weeks tops. Yeah. It just like was so straightforward and easy. And I think you're right that a lot of people do have this misconception of it's going to be all consuming, it's going to take months and months.
Or people see it sometimes as a last ditch effort, right? Even
Mhm.
IVF,
Yes.
like people will be like to me, I don't want to do IVF. And I'm like, why? They're like, because then I'm done. I failed. I'm like, you
Mm.
think that's all we got? Like one round of IVF? I'm like, no, 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 no. We have much more. So they think it's like sort of like you've gone here and then you can't come back, which is not the case anymore.
Mhm. Yeah, it really comes down to, like, is it a decision you're making via empowerment? Are you being empowered by this decision, or are you looking at it as a failure? And as someone who I think, Katie, you and I both, like, got to IVF as, like, after lots of failure, later in our lives, and also, like, now, I'm going into surrogacy because I'm found I can't carry, so, like, that also felt like a failure. But redefining this as actually like empowerment and opportunity and information changes the game. Like if your friend, your nail tech, Katie, went into that with a very empowered mindset.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
And that's Amy, you hit on it. That's really where egg freezing has changed. It used to be, I said, like our OG egg freezers, they were 44. It was like, they had nothing else. They're like, I don't have a partner. I want a baby. I don't want to use a donor egg. I'll just try this. So it was so much desperation. Now the 25-year-old is like, yeah, like I have an amazing job. I have a benefit. I want to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I just want to freeze and I'll see you in 10 years. And it's like such a different way of approaching it. I even think the fertility preservation, like the young egg freezing patient, has changed our waiting rooms. I know this sounds crazy, but people used to come with like their hats. They were like shrouded in
Mm.
secrecy, wanted nobody to
Mm.
know they were there because they were ashamed. I'm here, I have infertility. Now we have our egg freezing patients who are like coming in with their friends and they're like hanging out and doing Instagram posts, and like the waiting room is more dynamic. I'm like, hey, what's up? How's it going? So I do think it's a shift in how we look at our fertility. And I think that's a good thing.
Do you think social media has a lot to do with that? People documenting their egg freezing journeys
I
and like
do.
influencers? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as a mom of girls, like I hate social media for a lot of reasons because I think
Hmm.
it really has done a number on young women. But
Yeah.
the positive is that it has been a way to make community. And I think community allows us to not feel alone when we're going through something that it seems nobody else is going through, right? Like, how many times do you hear someone say, nobody else had to deal with this? Nobody else. I'm like, well, no, it's just nobody else you know. I will
Mhm.
oftentimes say to other patients, like, would you be willing to let somebody reach out to you to talk about your experience going through surrogacy or donor sperm? Because I think if you hear from somebody else, it makes it less isolating. And social media has done that in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I notice a lot of like on TikTok specifically, a lot of people will make like walk viewers through their journey of egg freezing, and I think that really helps people see what it's like and what to expect, but also kind of helps with what you're saying and demystifying it and making it seem like it's a much more common thing than people assume. One thing I do want to talk about is access and insurance coverage and kind of what the current landscape is, but also what are some of the things that we're fighting for and how do we make this more accessible for
Yeah.
everyone?
I mean,
Mhm.
it's changed a lot over the past, 10 years in my career. Like, it did start with Meta, which was then, I guess, Facebook, Google, and Apple covering fertility benefits. And they actually took a lot of flack for it because people are like, oh, they want their employees to work and not have kids, et cetera. But they were really the game changers because a lot of the
Mhm.
tech companies followed them. And then the
Mhm.
law firms, and now hospitals, and now it's Starbucks and Walmart and Home Depot. Like, people are finding to retain female talent, they have to offer what the guy or the girl next door is offering. So they may put it in. I joke around. I like used to do Hello Fresh, to make meals for my kids. And I'm
Ah,
sitting there. I'm like, where do you work? This one was like, Hello Fresh. They now give you a round of egg freezing. I'm like, good for them.
yeah.
So it's really that has expanded. Now it is by nowhere everyone has it, and we have a long way to go, but we are making progress there.
Mhm.
Is it generally cheaper than doing IVF, like the freezing process itself?
Right, because you don't need the second half of lab culture conditions. So you have to get
Hmm.
your eggs out and then those eggs are frozen. But the eggs are not growing its embryos in the lab, which is a cost that will happen down the road.
Yeah, the deferred cost. Maybe a quick question to interject here too, since we're talking about kind of the difference between egg freezing and embryo creation. What's the general thought around like quality and the thaw of eggs versus embryos? And I was listening to somebody else's story. Two gals going through egg freezing rounds, and they got some advice that like making embryos would be potentially more stable, but
Mm.
they didn't have partners, so that wasn't like an opportunity for them or something they didn't want to go do at that time. So could you talk us through a little bit of like the difference
Yeah.
between the
So
two?
people ask me that all the time, which is better? And I compare it, I do in the book, like to which of my daughters do I like better? I'm like, some days you and some days you. Right. But no, but they're better for different situations. So eggs win every single time for autonomy. If you don't have a partner with whom you want to have children with, you should freeze eggs because if you freeze embryos, you are locked into that sperm source, whether it's a donor sperm or a partner who says to you, I don't want to have children. I do
Mhm.
this not infrequently where I will call a patient and say, I have to be honest with you. I don't think you should freeze embryos with that person. I don't think they're on the same page as you. Because what happens at the end, if I don't say that, well, then the embryos are created. And then if we can't use them, the female partner is oftentimes screwed, right? Because her eggs have aged, her partner's sperm, not necessarily. So for autonomy, it's always eggs. Yes, you will not get the data about the health of your eggs when you freeze them, but you will have the opportunity to fertilize those eggs with whoever you want, whenever you want. If you have a partner with whom you are going to have a child, then you can freeze embryos if you want because you are theoretically on the same page, wanting to have a family, and that's a different story. When you make embryos, you know the data about the health of those embryos in that year that you froze them. So in 2025, I may say, well, all I know is I have 12 eggs frozen, or I have two healthy embryos from those eggs. If you do embryo freezing and you find out I have no good embryos, yes, you have the opportunity to freeze more embryos then when you're younger, and you don't when you freeze eggs. But if you don't
Mm,
have a partner to have children with, what are you doing? Right? Then you're in a place where then you're not going to be able to use them. Eggs
mhm.
survive thaws at higher rates because think
Mm.
about it,
Mm.
eggs are hundreds of cells. Eggs are only one. So you can't, it's like comparing
Oh,
apples to
embryos.
oranges.
Embryos
Embryos.
survive. Okay,
Embryos, yeah.
survive.
Embryos
Ah,
survive thaws.
yeah,
Sorry, yeah.
yeah,
Because there's
yeah.
more cells.
So generally we hear a rule of thumb of like 3 embryos for 1 live birth. That's like, I don't know
I think it
if you agree
depends
with that.
on where I say 1 to 2, depending on the quality of the embryo, right? So the embryos are biopsied and frozen on day 5, day 6, or day 7. So if you have day 5 blastocysts in the lab where I work, we're going to say your chances are 65 to 70%. So no, it's not 100%, but you don't need should not need 3 of those to make a healthy pregnancy. Day 6 is gonna hover around, 40 to 65%, and day 7 is more like 30%. Now, this is lab specific, right? So you need the data for the lab in which you freeze them, but that is important for you when you're thinking about your future fertility. Then you may say, well, we really, really want 3 children. So if you really want 3 children, you have to cover yourself to get there. So I may say, well, we should really have 5 embryos because if you come back in 5 years and nothing's working, we want to know we have extra.
Right. Is there a similar calculation or mental math model for
I
egg
thought you were gonna
freezing?
say that. Yeah. So
Yep.
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of those egg calculators. People say, "Oh, I go online, I put this in," because I was like, then you don't need me. I don't even need to be here, right? Because it's really that's like the art of what we do. Meaning, how old were you when you froze them? Did it take you 4 attempts to get 12 eggs, or did it take you 1 attempt? Because that's a different patient. A patient who freezes
Mm,
12 eggs on one go is very different than a patient that froze three, 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 and three, right? Because we're assuming there's something going on with the ovaries if they're getting so few every go. Do you
mm,
have big fibroids and we think maybe implantation might be hard? Are you in a family with strong cancer history that you may be a genetic mutation carrier? So I think there's a lot that goes into that question. Ideally, if you're under the age of 35 and you have 16 eggs, you should have a baby in there if frozen at a good fertility clinic. But there's
mhm,
a lot of caveats that people have to look at when they're going through the process.
mhm.
Yeah, I guess in that way, can egg freezing actually be diagnostic then sometimes if you are just going in to preserve your eggs, but then you find out maybe you don't have as many as you thought, but you're in your early 20s, or and then that kind of leads to further research and testing.
I have always said IVF is diagnostic and therapeutic, right? Because people
Mm,
come in and they need to do IVF for therapy for treatment. But when we see the egg and sperm come together, make an embryo grow in the lab, we learn so much about their health, about their egg and their sperm. So it's therapeutic. Egg freezing is not as great of a therapy
Okay.
because you don't learn about the health of the egg. With that being said, there are certain caveats that myself, like I'm a seasoned fertility doctor. If I have a patient gets 20 eggs and only 2 are able to be frozen, something's wrong with that egg development, right? Why is the maturity rate so low? Or if
mhm.
I have a patient whose AMH level is super, super low and they're 24, why is that, right? So that may glean there may be something going on down the road.
Do you have a baseline recommendation for rounds with patients of like how many rounds you would like them to do?
Yeah, it depends on the patient for me, right? Like
Yeah.
I always say things like, okay, how many eggs did you get? How many did we freeze? How was the process for you? If it was the worst thing ever and I was literally picking you up the floor every day, I'm like, let's take a pause, right? We don't need to go back into that. But did you have insurance benefits? If you did, going back to our Dodger example, our baseball example, if you have 2 cycles left, right? It's like I always say, you don't leave the man on third base. You hit the sac fly and you get that guy home. You don't need to hit the home run. So I'm like, use your benefits, add 12 more eggs if the process wasn't so bad. If you had to, put on 5 different credit cards and now you're in significant debt and you got 30 eggs, don't do it again, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's not like a black and white answer. I think there's a lot of gray to what the right decision is. Like I hung up with a patient of mine. I did her egg retrieval yesterday. She got 23 eggs and we froze
Yay.
20. She's 31.
Okay.
That's
Hmm.
amazing, right? So she said to me, most of my patients call me Jamie because like I don't go by doctor. She's like, Jamie, I just finished through a bad divorce. I really, really want 3 to 4 kids. This process was super easy and I have fertility benefits for another cycle. Do you think it's crazy if I did it again? And I said, sure, I don't think it's crazy. I said, I think 20 eggs at 31 is amazing. But if you're saying you're just getting through the divorce, which means you're probably not going to be in a place to have a baby for at least a few years, and you really have always pictured having 4 kids, why not? Right. But
Mhm.
if a patient said to me, it was horrible, I had to pay for it out of pocket, I'm not going to tell her to run and do it again.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, fertility, it is a business, right? So a lot of people do things for money, and that is
Mhm.
not great. But our job is to try and figure out what's best for you, risks, benefits, success rates all in one.
Do you have any recommendations or pro tips for a new patient who's trying to figure out what's the right path for them in regards to like, should they do another? Should they not? Like, is this a business? What kind of questions should they be like thinking about asking their doctor as they're getting started with this? Because it can be a bit overwhelming. And I'll just say from my own experience that uh, you'd I mean, I know the goal is to get people to feel empowered by this as an option for them, but oftentimes it can feel like, like a last resort or like we're in desperation mode. So
Yeah.
we become very susceptible and like sort of an easy target to
Mm.
and a little desperate to like what can I do, and that can put us in a really vulnerable position.
I think that's hard because I do think there are bad actors, right? There are people who are going to take advantage and there are people who are not going to know, is this right? Is this wrong? I think you have to also use your resources, which are people like your OBGYN or your internist or, services like there's a lot of like online health coaches. You have to try and gather information sometimes on your own because unfortunately not everyone is going to be fully honest.
What are your thoughts about like egg quality supplements and the market of like egg health and improving? Like, do you have patients who will come to you and be like, I do all of these things and buy all of these things to make sure my eggs are the best before we do this?
I am down on that because the problem is there is nothing that has been proven to change the quality of our eggs. Do I wish that I could say, take this pill and it's like I'm like the good witch Glenda. I wave the wand and now your eggs are perfect. But that's not true, right? Should you be healthy? We should all try and be healthy. We should sleep, we should exercise, we should eat right. But that is not necessarily going to change the quality of our eggs. I think what a lot of those things, the supplements, acupuncture, the lifestyle, I think sometimes it allows people to feel like they're in control when the process is uncontrollable. And that's a good thing. Where I think it becomes a bad thing is where people go really left field rogue and then they're sort of not doing what's going to benefit them. And you're like, oh, goodness, they're sort
Mm.
of long gone. Right. So I'm not against it. I always say to patients, I don't know if it'll help. I don't think it'll hurt, but I think you need to combine Eastern and Western and go together, not decide I'm going to go totally here and not listen to any other medical advice.
Mhm.
Yeah, we've talked a bit about like things that may or may not work, not in the standard of care yet, and how to differentiate like the potential downside or if it could hurt me, um, versus like it may not have just we don't have enough research on it or it's not been adopted in the standard of care, and that can also be challenging. But I think you're spot on about like we just want to feel some semblance of control, which
100%.
and then
I
it
mean,
can be
I have
very
done it
easy for us
myself.
to
Like,
fall down.
yeah, completely. Like I say I'm a retired athlete. I've had like a fair share of orthopedic injuries where, and unfortunately for my friend, he is my orthopedist, my knee surgeon. sometimes he's like, I don't know how we're still friends, but he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I know it sounds crazy, but I just need to do it for myself to like see if it helps. And then I'm
Mm,
like, I know if it doesn't, I'll come back and do something else. But like, I want to know that I have done something. And as long as that's not going to hurt me, then fine, do it. I
mm,
think it's when people start to do things and I'm like, you spent what on what? Then you're like, somebody is selling you something that really just isn't true. And we have to remember, like, I always use myself as an example. I got breast cancer when I just turned 40, right? I was very healthy. I was avid exerciser. Like, I had good screening. I probably have a genetic mutation that unfortunately gave me early breast cancer, right? That's probably how a lot of the fertility stuff is, but we just don't know the genes as they relate to fertility today. We were
mm,
talking about Fragile X, right? You come in with low egg quantity, we test you for Fragile X, we do a karyotype. There's probably hundreds of thousands of other genes that cause you to have fertility struggles. We just don't know. So when
mm.
my grandmother had breast cancer, she didn't get genetic testing. I got BRCA and this and that. And probably the people that come behind me will get even more genetic testing, but we just don't know the genes to that.
Transitioning into your work then with Chick Mission, and you clearly have a personal story and investment in this kind of work. But can you, for listeners who are unfamiliar with Chick Mission and what it is that you do, can you talk about how you're helping cancer patients?
So, when you are diagnosed with cancer, oftentimes there are going to be treatments that can render you infertile, right? Surgery for reproductive organs and or chemotherapy can impact your egg health. So if you don't freeze eggs or freeze embryos ahead of such treatment, you could very well wind up being infertile, but you don't have a lot of time to gather the information and the funds. So this is where Chick Mission steps in and they will provide grants to women who want to freeze their eggs ahead of cancer treatment. We started in 2017. I think that first year we maybe gave 8 grants. Now we've given over 700. So it's
It's amazing.
really unbelievable what they have done, or I guess we, because I am on their team. So
Yeah, yeah, what you all
Yeah.
have done. Yes. Yeah, I think it's so empowering to be able, and just in a time that I'm sure feels so hopeless and scary, and to be able to have that option, right? To not have to think about that.
people say that a lot. They say throughout all the darkness, I had a little bit of hope because I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I
Yeah.
have 17 eggs on ice that maybe I will use one day
Ugh,
when I'm all done with this. And I think that does bring people through darkness because, I mean, if you don't have hope, what do you have, right? Like in anything we do, right? You got to hope that things will turn out better. You have to hope that, otherwise you just might as well live in despair.
More question on that front. So, and I think you've alluded to some of this as well, but um, I guess in the conversation, if folks are going through a cancer diagnosis and you don't have much time, like you already flagged, to actually do retrieval, egg freezing. I can imagine you're also needing to help people navigate fertility loss, or kind of and the process there, and potentially grieving that and considering potentially second options. I'm sure you also see patients who
Yeah.
come to you or get to you too late, right? Or the options are limited at that point. I guess maybe thinking about how folks can manage those decisions, and what do you do to help them make those decisions and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of, like, if you look at the book, when we did the graphic
Yeah.
in the middle, that's what I think the thing that I have learned, not just as a fertility doctor, but just, like, living life, is, like, life is a journey, but that journey is not linear. It is circuitous. And you think when when we're young, we're like, just like how I said, "I'm gonna go to med school, I'm gonna do a residency, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that." Like, yeah, haha, right? Like, it's all like this and that. So my job is to tell patients, you can be a parent. There is several paths to parenthood. You can grieve the loss of using your own eggs or having a partner or carrying your baby. But ultimately, if you get stuck somewhere on that path, you're never going to get to the end, which is having a baby, right? So my job is to sort of shepherd you through all of those stages to help you not get stuck in one of these phases of grief to ultimately become a parent. And that is like has been a big learning experience for me as a
Mm.
physician, right? Like
Mm.
we don't learn how to give bad news in residency or medical
Yeah.
school, right? So you're sort of like, oh my God, what do I do? And I think all of us are so uncomfortable with negative, with loss that we
Mm.
don't know what to do. But I have learned from doing this a long time, like the best thing to do is just to sit with somebody in their grief, let them get that, like let them feel that, and then help them gather themselves up and move to the next step. And that's really what a big part of what my job is.
Own Your Fertility. So it comes out in January. Who is it for? And also, like, what is the main takeaway? What's the through line? What do you want readers to really get when they read this book?
I think it's mostly for young women who I want to feel empowered about their fertility, who I want to educate, and who I want to then become advocates for their own selves and for their next generation, right? I
Mm.
once gave a talk, I'll never forget this. And we were talking about egg freezing, and a woman stood up and she said, "This isn't fair." And I'm like, "Oh, what's not fair?" She's like, "That my generation didn't have egg freezing." And
Mm.
I said to her, "We stand on the shoulders of those that came before us." Like, I'm a female physician that, 50 years ago, there were hardly any female. I'm here because of the women that broke barriers. So we can only affect change. Like we can affect change for the people that come after us. And that's what I really hope that I do, that some woman picks this up and is like, I'm going to do something different than I was because now I read her words.
It's so
Awesome.
inspiring. Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
because I kind of feel the same way with a lot of IVF and fertility advancements and what that will look like for my daughter's generation, and kind of mourning some of those things of like,
Mhm.
oh, like I wish I would have had this in women's healthcare. I wish I wouldn't have had to fight so hard to be heard or listened to, but like also being so grateful to see things changing and to see all of the innovation and to know that, yeah, for the younger generation, like egg freezing will be a part of healthcare conversations. Like it's not going to be something that's fringe or not talked about or done
Mm-hmm.
by the one person, like the friend of the friend of the friend that you knew. But
Yep, exactly, exactly. And that people will be more like you will make choices about your body instead of your body making choices about you, right?
Mm,
Because
I love
that's
that.
really what we want.
Wow. Yeah.
That's really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to wrap up here with a fun question because you are a powerhouse and doing so much work for so many people, managing CCRM and working in these nonprofits and writing a book and raising daughters. What do you do for self-care? And what are some tips you have for those of us that are also trying to be everything?
I definitely don't have all the answers, trust me. I'm a big fitness, like I love exercise, and I
Mm.
think for me that's like my therapy. So I try and exercise pretty much every day, whether it be, going for a run, lifting weights, playing tennis with my friends. Like I think that's very important. And I do that a lot. I also like I love people. I'm definitely an extrovert. So I like to spend time with other people, and sometimes they're like, "Tell me your story. What's your life?" Like, like learning about other people. I feel like that's very I mean, that what do we have if we don't have relationships with other people,
Mm.
right? So to me, that's very uplifting.
I love that. That's so great. And such a good plug for all of us to take care of our physical bodies to also help with these fertility
Right.
challenges as well.
It's like every single time I go to the gym, I'm like, why was this such a struggle to get here? Because I feel so much better now.
Yeah.
But
So much.
then,
So much. When my kids are like being crazy, I'll be like, "Go for a run." Right?
yeah.
And I'm in like they'll be like, "What? What?" And I'm like, "Just trust me. Go for a run. Let's go for a 3-mile run and we'll come back and we'll both feel better." Because then your like mind is clear. And it's
Oh
not
my
like
gosh.
my generation, it was about like calories and
Hmm.
you had to burn them, etc. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you'll feel better in your head because your
Hmm.
body will feel better. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big pusher of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. My husband is a swimmer. And every time he goes to the pool, it's like a night and day difference. Like he can leave the house so stressed and overwhelmed and then comes back a completely different person just from, yeah, 30 minutes of moving his body, getting in the pool.
I
It's
always
such
wish
Mhm.
I could be a swimmer because it's so much low more low impact,
Yeah.
but I have my hair. It's just like, what do you do with your hair? It's so hard.
It's like
You have to blow it
this.
again. And
No, I
Right.
just would
Yeah.
never. It'd just be in a ponytail, like a top knot, always. Yeah.
Right. Just
so much.
always.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Knopman, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us and sharing your expertise with listeners. We're just so excited about where this conversation is going and
Me
the future of fertility and egg freezing. And we're so appreciative of your voice and what you're doing for younger generations. And we're really excited to promote your book this next year. 2026 is going to be a great year.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a lovely, exciting conversation. And I love the name of your podcast, by the way. Amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Yay.
It's good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
That's awesome.
And go Dodgers. Amy and
Go
Dodgers.
Dodgers.
I'm going to go get my hat.
Yes.
I wanted to
know,
look
me too.
professional for this call. I
By
should
the
have just worn the
time-
hat.
By the time
Sure.
this comes out, it will be old news, but I am
Well,
hoping
no, somebody will be, they'll be like,
somebody-
who won the World Series? They'll know who it was, right?
Yeah, the future.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful day.
You
Thank
too.
you. You too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.